My life with Robert was, for many years, a quiet masterpiece of second chances. We had both come into the marriage with baggage, though mine was simply a failed engagement, and his was a messy public divorce from his high school sweetheart, Audrey. Audrey was the mother of his son, Leo, a brilliant but troubled teenager. Robert and I met in our late 30s. He was a successful architect, grounded, steady, and seemingly entirely done with drama. I was a museum curator, thriving in my world of history and quiet order. Our life together was a deliberate contrast to the chaos he'd left behind: predictable Sunday brunches, scheduled date nights, and a calm, shared approach to raising Leo, who spent every other weekend with us. Leo was 14 when I entered Robert's life, a resentful ball of teenage angst who initially saw me as the intruder. It took time, patience, and a shared love for obscure science fiction movies, but we built a bridge. He started calling me Clara, not Dad's wife. He'd even confide in me about his difficult relationship with Audrey, who was, by all accounts, highly volatile and still deeply resentful of Robert's happiness. The uneasy peace in our blended family relied on clear boundaries, especially regarding Audrey-Robert, and Audrey maintained a strictly business-like co-parenting relationship, communicating only via text about Leo's schedule and expenses. Any emotional contact was, according to Robert, entirely cut off. "She's toxic, Clara," he'd tell me whenever Audrey's name came up. "She lives in the past. You are my present and my future." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Robert's job required frequent travel. He was the kind of architect who needed to be on site, shaking hands and inspecting foundations. Every few months he'd be gone for a week or two. Chicago, Boston, sometimes even London. I had grown accustomed to the routine. The pre-dawn taxi ride, the quick text upon landing, and the daily evening calls where he'd give me a condensed version of his day. The first hint of unease started 6 months ago, just before his scheduled trip to Seattle. He was sitting at the dining table, packing his laptop bag. I noticed he was meticulous about his work gear, but his personal travel bag, a durable canvas duffel he always used, was missing. "Honey, where's your duffel bag?" I asked, placing a cup of coffee beside him. "The one you use for short trips?" He didn't look up. "Oh, I bought a new one. Lighter, more professional. I left it in the trunk of the car already." It was a small lie, one I barely noticed at the time. Robert was meticulous about his things. He wouldn't just replace his favorite bag without mentioning it. Then came the second tremor, the Seattle trip. "I need you to handle the FedEx delivery on Tuesday," he told me the night before leaving. "It's a signed contract, crucial, must be signed for by an adult." "Of course," I said, "but why FedEx? Your firm usually uses a private courier for important documents." He frowned, impatient. "It was a last-minute change. The Seattle office is handling the logistics. Just take the package, please. Don't worry about the details." The trip felt off. He was less chatty on the phone. His daily updates were shorter, vague, and often interrupted by background noise that sounded less like a busy hotel lobby and more like a car wash or a suburban street. 2 days into the trip, Leo called. This was highly unusual. Leo typically only called Robert or me if he was confirming his drop-off time for the weekend. I answered, surprised. "Leo, everything okay?" "Hey, Clara, yeah, I'm fine. Is Dad around?" His voice was guarded, a little breathless. "He's in Seattle. Honey business trip, remember? You want me to give him a message when he calls tonight?" There was a long silence on the other end, so heavy it felt like a presence in the room. "Seattle?" Leo finally asked, his voice cracking with confusion. And something else, a strange, brittle kind of anger. "Yes, Seattle." "Why?" "Clara," he said, and the way he used my name, stripped of any teenage sarcasm or casual familiarity, instantly raised the hairs on my arms. It was the tone of a person delivering grave news. "I don't think Dad is in Seattle." "Leo, don't be silly. He called me from his hotel a few hours ago," I said, trying to keep my voice light, dismissing the panic rising in my throat. "I know," he insisted. "But Clara, my mom called me this morning. Totally frantic. She said Dad's car is parked outside our house. The blue Ford. She thought he was just dropping off some papers, but it's been there since yesterday. She said he's inside, and he told her he's sick and can't drive home, but he's supposed to be in Seattle." My world tilted. The blue Ford Robert always drove the black SUV for business trips, the one with the firm's logo. The blue Ford was his personal weekend car. It was less conspicuous. "Leo, your mom must be mistaken," I whispered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Maybe it's a similar car. They're common." "No, Clara," Leo said, his voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. "It has the scratch, the one Dad got when he backed into the mailbox on Christmas. The scratch on the driver's side door. It's his car. He's at my mom's house. He's not in Seattle." The silence returned, but this time it was my own. The pieces snapped into place. The missing duffel bag, the rushed FedEx delivery, a decoy, the vague phone calls, and now the undeniable proof of his personal car, miles away from any airport, parked outside his ex-wife's house. I looked at the phone, then at my quiet, orderly living room. The second chance had been an illusion. The masterpiece was a lie. "Leo," I said, forcing the words out, "thank you for telling me. I need you to promise me something. Don't tell your dad or your mom that you called me. Do you understand? Not a word." "I understand, Clara," he replied, and his sudden maturity, his position as the messenger of devastating truth, felt like a deeper betrayal than Robert's. "I have to go," I whispered, hanging up the phone, my hand shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. Robert was not in Seattle. Robert was in his ex-wife's house. The foundation of our quiet, ordered life had just collapsed. Leo's phone call was a silent grenade thrown into my quiet world. My body went cold, but my mind began to work with the fastidious precision of a museum curator spotting a forgery in an artifact. Robert's lies, when examined closely, were starting to show the telltale signs of a meticulous fake. That night, I re-examined the daily texts and calls Robert had sent from Seattle. Previously, these calls had been detailed reports, peppered with architectural jargon and long descriptions of his day. Now they were short. Meetings were intense. Totally exhausted. Love you, good night. The fatigue in his voice was real, but its source was not Seattle buildings. It was the stress of his double life. I reconsidered Leo's words. The car has been there since yesterday. He's inside and claims he's sick. This suggested Robert wasn't just meeting Audrey, he was staying there. Crucially, Robert staying at Audrey's house could mean that Audrey was complicit in the deception. However, Leo had described his mother as surprised and disturbed. The following day, Robert sent his usual good morning text. I didn't reply. I took a day off work, and my first priority was dealing with the urgent and important package I was supposed to receive. The FedEx truck arrived midday. The courier handed me a large, heavy tube. It bore the logo of Robert's architecture firm and a return address from a construction company in Seattle. The weight of the tube and the specific details on the label showed that everything had been meticulously planned to reinforce the business trip narrative. Robert had not only told a lie, he had spent time and money fabricating evidence. I carried the tube to the living room and carefully opened it. Inside were a series of complex architectural blueprints and a note. The note was in Robert's familiar handwriting. Clara, scan these and urgently email them to the New York office, then send the hard copies back here. Confirmation came from Seattle. Kisses. This was the final piece of his deception mechanism. It was making me an unwitting accomplice, a subcontractor in his own lie. I closed my eyes and trembled with a deep, silent anger. Robert was using my professional reliability and my trust as a tool for his fake business trip. I set the tube aside. It was time to address the issue directly, but I wouldn't do it according to Robert's false Seattle timeline. I would strike at the moment he thought he was safest, while he was supposedly thousands of miles away. That evening, my phone rang at the usual time. The screen read, "Seattle Robert." I answered it. "Hello, darling," he said, a forced cheerfulness in his tone. "It was a really long day. Did you send the blueprints?" "Yes, Robert," I said, trying to keep my voice as neutral as possible. "I sent them. They were very detailed. Your work in Seattle must be extremely intense." "It is," he sighed, a touch of tension creeping into his voice. "Everything moves so fast here. Thank goodness I have you. By the way, how is Leo? Did he ask you for anything?" The question felt like a test, an attempt to check if Leo had contacted me. "Leo is perfectly fine," I said. "He's busy with school. But Robert, something just crossed my mind. This Seattle trip is going to be a bit long, isn't it?" "I told you I'll be back on Monday," he said, his voice tightening slightly. "Yes, but we forgot to change the winter tires," I continued, deliberately leading the conversation into an irrelevant corner. "Your blue Ford." Robert inhaled sharply, cutting me off. The silence on the other end was sudden and loud, and I could hear my own heart pounding in my chest. What about the blue Ford?" he asked, his voice no longer tired but laced with genuine fear. "Nothing," I said, adding a touch of faux innocence this time. "It's just sitting there in the garage. I was just thinking you would have been better off driving it with the winter tires to Seattle, wouldn't you? Why did you take the smaller Ford to Seattle when your big black SUV is sitting in the garage with its winter tires on?" Exposing a small, easily verifiable part of his lie was a precise strike. Robert now believed I knew the blue Ford was in the garage. Thinking my knowledge was limited to that, he didn't know yet that I knew exactly where the car truly was. Outside his ex-wife's house. "Clara, he stammered, his words tangled. "I used a rental car, the blue Ford. I left it in long-term parking at the airport. The SUV had a flat tire. I noticed it last minute." Another unbelievable lie. "Robert," I said, my voice now cold and hard, "you left the blue Ford in long-term parking without changing the winter tires? Really? Did you forget, or did you assume you'd be coming back for it quickly after dropping it off outside Audrey's house?" The final sentence sliced through the air. The silence that followed was total. I could practically hear the collapse of his entire fabricated reality. The fact that I used Leo's mother's name, coupled with the car's location, was the coup de grace. "Clara, listen to me," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. I can explain. This wasn't a business trip. I'm here, yes, but it's not what you think. It's a what, Robert? I asked with a bitter, cynical edge. A second chance? Or was Audrey so desperate that your 14-year-old son had to call me to expose you? My words, the inclusion of Leo's name, was the final blow. Robert knew he wasn't just deceiving me, he had involved his son in his toxic mess. "Leo," he yelled, his voice a mix of shock and fury. "My son called you." "No, Robert," I clarified, without technically lying. "Your son didn't call you. Your son saved me. He showed me the respect you didn't. Now don't tell me the truth from your Seattle hotel room. Tell me the truth from Audrey's living room. Why are you there?" A long, agonizing moment passed. Then Robert's voice, completely defeated, completely stripped of artifice, arrived as a raw, ugly admission. "Okay, Clara, you're right, I'm here. But it's not an affair. This is something much more complicated." The word complicated confirmed that his lie was not a mere sexual transgression, but a deep, long-term, emotional betrayal. I was ready to hear it. The line was still open, filled with Robert's heavy, ragged breathing. The word complicated echoed in my mind. In marriage, complicated is rarely a good sign. It usually means simple cheating, but with maximum collateral damage. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice now dangerously soft, masking the white-hot core of my fury. "Robert, you faked a work trip to Seattle, set up a sophisticated decoy package, and abandoned your responsibility here to drive your private car across 3 states and hide at your ex-wife's house. Explain complicated to me." "It's about Leo," he confessed, the sound of his voice confirming he was close to tears. "It's always about Leo. You know how much trouble he's been having at school. The fighting, the grades. Audrey, she's spiraling. She found out she might lose her job and she's barely holding it together. She called me utterly distraught, saying she couldn't handle Leo and the stress. She was threatening to send him away to boarding school immediately, even though it would destroy him." My initial rage cooled slightly, replaced by a deep, frustrating skepticism. This sounded like a convenient truth, designed to elicit my sympathy as the calm, responsible second wife. "So your solution to Audrey's stress and Leo's problems was to lie to your current wife, abandon your job, and move in with your ex?" I challenged. "Why couldn't you tell me? Why the Seattle performance? I would have supported you supporting Leo." "Because you wouldn't understand," Robert burst out. "You see everything in black and white, Clara. If I told you, you'd demand clear boundaries. You'd demand I solve the problem logically, financially. Audrey, she needed my presence. She needed the comfort of the old dynamic. She was having a mental health crisis, and Leo was caught in the middle. I came here to stabilize the situation, to shield Leo." He painted himself as a noble martyr, sacrificing his own integrity for his son, with me as the rigid, unfeeling obstacle. "You shielded Leo by teaching him it's acceptable to lie to the people you love?" I retorted. "He had to call me, a teenager, because his father was too cowardly to admit he was prioritizing his ex-wife's emotional comfort over his current marriage. And what about Audrey? Is she so unstable that she needs to share a roof with you for 3 days?" Just as I asked the question, I heard a sharp, female voice in the background, muffled but distinct. "Robert, who are you talking to? You need to hang up. I heard my name." The sound of Audrey's voice, possessive and urgent, was like a bucket of ice water. "Is that Audrey?" I asked, my voice now vibrating with renewed cold fury. "No, yes, she's here," Robert stammered. "She's worried, Clara. This is not an affair. We are sleeping in separate rooms. I swear on Leo's life. I'm here as a mediator, a support system. A support system that operates under the cover of a massive, systematic lie." I finished for him. "Robert, I don't believe you. I don't believe your claim that this is purely about Leo or Audrey's mental health. The moment you chose to deceive me, you made a choice about your priorities. And your priority is the preservation of your old life and your desire to be the hero in Audrey's drama." My breathing was shallow and fast. I knew this conversation wouldn't yield the full truth. Robert would continue to twist the facts, protecting the illusion that he was the good guy. I had to see the situation with my own eyes. I needed to see the state of their mediation and the dynamic that Leo had been forced to witness. "Where exactly are you, Robert?" I demanded. He named a quiet suburb just outside of Philadelphia, roughly a 5-hour drive from our city. "Stay there," I instructed, the plan forming rapidly in my mind. "Don't move the blue Ford. Don't leave Audrey's house. You have destroyed my peace with a secret visit. Now you will restore it with a public, immediate confrontation." "What? Clara, don't be ridiculous. You can't just drive here. It will make everything worse," he pleaded. "It's already worse than you can possibly imagine," I stated flatly. "I am getting in my car right now. I want to look both of you in the eye. I want to hear the complicated truth from Audrey. And I want to see the state of your separate rooms with my own 2 eyes. I will be there in 5 hours. I didn't wait for his reply. I slammed the phone down. I turned to Lena, who had been silently watching my intense monologue, the pen held poised over her legal pad. "Lena, I need you to book a flight tonight," I said, my hands shaking as I grabbed my keys. "I'm not waiting until Monday. I need to know the truth tonight before he can move the car or invent another lie." Lena didn't argue or try to calm me down. She simply stood up, her face resolute. "I'm driving with you," she stated, putting the pen away. 5 hours to Philadelphia. We need coffee, gas, and a clear strategy. What are we looking for, Clara? "I'm looking for the full story," I told her, grabbing a small overnight bag. "I'm looking for the evidence that this is a marriage, not an emergency. And I'm looking for the precise moment my husband started lying to me. Not just about Seattle, but about the true cost of his second chance with me." We left the quiet, orderly house, leaving behind the blueprint Robert had used to map out his elaborate deception. The road ahead was long, dark, and filled with the terrifying uncertainty of a crumbling marriage. But at least I wasn't waiting in the dark anymore. I was driving straight toward the fire. The 5-hour drive felt less like a road trip and more like a high-speed chase toward the truth. Lena drove, her hands steady on the wheel, while I sat hunched over my phone, reviewing old photos and texts, searching for the exact moment the facade had begun to crack, even before the Seattle trip. "You need to think like a prosecutor, Clara," Lena instructed, her eyes fixed on the highway. "Forget the emotion. Robert is trying to minimize this as a crisis intervention. You need to establish the premeditation. The blue Ford, the fabricated FedEx package, the lie about the flat tire." "It's the duffel bag that gets me," I admitted, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "He always used the same canvas duffel. When I asked about it, he said he bought a new, more professional one. He must have left the original bag at Audrey's house weeks ago. He was already spending nights there." Lena nodded grimly. That shows intent, Clara. This isn't a sudden crisis. It's a slow, quiet relapse into his old life, using you as the stable anchor he comes home to. My mind raced back to the early days of our relationship. Robert had always painted his divorce from Audrey as a necessary escape from her unpredictable nature and emotional volatility. He made himself sound like the long-suffering victim who was finally seeking peace. Was the volatility the real reason? Or was it that he simply couldn't handle the responsibility of being truly separate? He always made Audrey sound unhinged, I told Lena, rubbing my temples. He said their relationship was a constant battlefield. He said he married me because I was calm and ordered. Now I see it. He didn't want a calm wife. He wanted a safe harbor, a place where he could recharge before sailing back into Audrey's drama. You weren't his second chance, Clara, Lena said gently, but without sugarcoating. You were his retreat, his reliable, predictable option. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The years I spent believing I was the preferred, stable choice. It was all a sham. I wasn't loved for my calm nature. I was used for it. As we neared Philadelphia, Lena pulled into a brightly lit rest area. Final strategy, Clara, she said, turning the engine off. When we get there, you need to be firm. Do not let Robert take you outside or into a separate room. You want Audrey present. This needs to be a unified, transparent confrontation where neither of them can hide behind their own version of the truth. What if they refuse to open the door? I asked, the fear finally bubbling up. You have two options, Lena replied, looking me straight in the eye. 1. You call the non-emergency police line and tell them you tracked your husband's car to this location and you are concerned for his safety due to his sudden disappearance, and the lie about a work trip that forces them to deal with a third party. 2. You get loud, you knock, you yell his name, and you make sure every neighbor on that street knows that the architect from out of state is hiding out with his ex-wife while lying to his current one. I thought of Leo, the teenager who had shown more courage and integrity than his father. I didn't want to drag Leo through a noisy public scandal. We try the confrontation first, I decided. If they try to lock me out, I'll use the police option. I don't care about their neighbors. I care about establishing the facts. We finished the drive in tense silence. The GPS led us down a quiet, tree-lined street filled with charming, well-kept suburban homes. Each house looked safe, normal, and utterly incapable of hosting the betrayal that was currently unfolding inside Lena. Slowed the car as we approached the number the GPS gave us. And there it was, parked just slightly askew in the driveway, half hidden by a sprawling oak tree, was the deep blue Ford Roberts personal car, the one with the small, unmistakable scratch above the driver's side wheel, the scar from the Christmas mailbox incident. The physical proof of his lie, sitting there in the pale glow of a street lamp, miles away from any airport or supposed Seattle construction site. I felt a surge of adrenaline, replacing the exhaustion. This was real. This was the place where he went when he needed to escape the life we built. Stay in the car, Lena, I instructed, my hand already on the door handle. Keep your phone ready. Document the car. Document the house. And if I'm not back in 5 minutes, call the police. I got out, feeling the cool night air on my face. I walked up the path to the front door of Audrey's house. It was a modest, slightly cluttered home, a complete contrast to the sleek, minimalist design of our own house. It felt more lived in, messier, and somehow, terrifyingly, more real. I raised my fist and knocked, not tentatively, but with a firm, deliberate rhythm. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet night. I took a deep, steadying breath. I was no longer the quiet curator or the predictable wife. I was the woman who had driven 5 hours to demand the truth, and I would not leave until I had it. The light flickered on in the hall, and through the decorative glass panel on the door, I saw a shadow moving towards me. The door slowly opened, revealing not Robert, but Audrey. She was clearly startled. Her hair was messy. She wore a faded t-shirt and her face was pale, lined with the stress Robert had described. But in her eyes, I saw not the toxic volatility Robert had warned me about, but a raw, panicked recognition. "Clara?" she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here? How—" "I know Robert isn't in Seattle, Audrey," I interrupted, my voice sharp and clear. "I know his car is in your driveway, and I know he's inside. I'm here for the complicated truth. I suggest you let me in before I decide to bring the police to the door." Audrey hesitated for only a second longer, a strange mix of terror and reluctant relief flashing in her eyes. The threat of involving the police, the fear of the neighbors, it worked. She pulled the door open just enough for me to slip inside, then quickly shut it as if closing a vault on a dangerous secret. The interior of the house was a complete visual assault after the neatness of our own suburban home. It was cluttered, filled with the comfortable chaos of real life. School books on the floor, laundry draped over a chair, and a stack of unsorted bills on the kitchen counter. It wasn't the lair of a sexy, younger mistress. It was the exhausted home of a struggling single mother. "He's in the kitchen," Audrey whispered, her voice strained. "But please, Clara, you don't understand. Don't yell. Leo is asleep upstairs." "I am not here to hurt Leo, Audrey," I said, my gaze steady. "I am here because Robert lied to me for months and then abandoned me to manage your crisis. I need the truth, and I need it now." I walked directly toward the kitchen. The house smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old popcorn. Robert was standing by the sink, still wearing the professional clothes he supposedly wore to architect meetings in Seattle. His face, when he turned and saw me, went utterly slack. He looked less like a noble hero and more like a guilty child who had finally been dragged before his mother. "Clara," he breathed, taking an involuntary step back, bumping into the counter. You actually came. I told you not to." "And I told you to stay put," I retorted, stopping in the doorway, "which you finally did. So let's talk about complicated. Since you've established that I'm too rigid and logical to understand, perhaps Audrey can translate." I looked at Audrey, who stood frozen between us, her arms wrapped around herself. The air crackled with the heavy history that bound these two people, a history I had naively believed Robert had severed years ago. "What is the complication, Audrey?" I demanded. "Is he having an affair with you, or is this the emotional relapse Robert described?" Audrey looked at Robert, her expression one of utter resentment. "Tell her, Robert. Tell her what you're really doing here." Robert swallowed hard, looking everywhere but at me. "I told her, Audrey. I told her you were having a breakdown and Leo—" "Stop hiding behind our son," Audrey suddenly snapped, her controlled panic turning into explosive fury, finally confirming the volatility Robert had described. This isn't just about Leo's grades. This is about the mortgage, Robert. Tell her about the agreement. Robert's eyes widened in panic. Audrey, no, that was private. The mortgage, I repeated, my logical brain instantly latching onto the sudden shift from emotional drama to financial reality. What agreement? Robert, we have a joint account for child support. Why would the mortgage be your problem? Audrey ignored Robert's desperate pleas for silence and marched toward me, her voice low and fierce. Because he never actually left Clara, she hissed, her finger pointed at Robert's chest. Not financially. When we divorced 5 years ago, Robert insisted on an unusual arrangement. He kept his name on the house deed, not just to guarantee Leo's stability, but to keep the low interest rate we had. He made a secret, notarized agreement with me. He pays half the mortgage, and in exchange, he gets a silent stake in the property. It was his way of ensuring his financial safety net if his high-flying new life ever failed. My heart began to pound, not from shock, but from the realization of the breathtaking depth of Robert's long-term deception. So you co-own this house? I whispered, staring at Robert, whose face was now a sickly shade of gray. Not co-own, Clara, co-liable, Audrey corrected, her voice dripping with bitterness. And because I lost my job 3 weeks ago and missed a payment, the bank called him, not me, because his name is listed as the primary account holder. His credit was about to be ruined. He didn't come here to save me from a mental health crisis. He came here to save his credit score from a foreclosure. The Seattle trip was just a cover to spend a few days transferring money and dealing with the bank manager. The truth, revealed by his angry ex-wife, was far more cynical than any simple affair. Robert hadn't lied to protect Leo's emotional stability. He had lied to protect his financial stability, a stability he had maintained by keeping one foot permanently anchored in his old life with Audrey. The complicated truth was that Robert had leveraged his marriage to me, my income, my stability, my emotional calm. To shield his hidden financial arrangement with Audrey, I was a beautiful, stable veneer over a rotten, pre-existing structure. You told me you hated the messiness of your life with Audrey, I stated to Robert, my eyes piercing his. But you chose to maintain a secret financial tie that kept you tethered to her for 5 years. The stability you craved wasn't in marrying me. It was in controlling the instability you left behind. Robert finally found his voice, weak and desperate. It was smart, Clara. It was a business decision. I told you I needed a safety net. And yes, Audrey was having a meltdown and I was helping. It was both. No, I said, shaking my head. The meltdown was your excuse to explain why your car was here. The financial tie is the reason you left me. You are not a noble mediator, Robert. You are a coward who wanted to be married to 2 lives at once, the glamorous architect and the dependable ex-husband. I turned back to Audrey. You let him lie to me. For 3 days, you helped him maintain a massive deception. Audrey stepped back, her anger momentarily cooling to defensive resentment. He convinced me it was necessary. He said you wouldn't understand. He said if you knew, you would force him to sell the house and Leo would lose his home. I did this for Leo. The blame game had started. But I had what I came for. The definitive proof that Robert's second chance with me was built on a calculated financial betrayal that predated our marriage. I had seen the shared cage, and I would now be the one to unlock it. The air in Audrey's kitchen was thick with accusation and the smell of their messy, shared history. Robert was a pathetic sight. his hands raised in a gesture of defeated pleading, while Audrey stood defiantly, her resentment toward Robert overriding her fear of me. A financial safety net, I repeated, letting the full weight of the cynical phrase settle over me. For 5 years, Robert. You were married to me, but you maintained a secret financial tether to your past. And when that tether threatened to ruin your credit, you lied to me, created an elaborate decoy, and used a medical emergency as a flimsy excuse to hide with your ex-wife. I took out my phone and quickly snapped a photo of the unsorted bills on the counter, then turned the camera slightly to include the terrified look on Robert's face. Documentation was everything. This is no longer about infidelity, I declared, my voice cold and steady, mirroring Ms. Hayes's professional tone. This is about fraudulent concealment of marital liabilities. You knowingly kept a significant high-risk financial obligation hidden from me, and you used marital funds to make those secret payments. Robert staggered forward. Clara, stop. Don't involve the lawyers in this. I'll fix it. I'll take my name off the deed tomorrow. I'll sign the house over to Audrey. I'll do anything. Just don't tell your lawyer about this, please. My firm, they have a zero-tolerance policy for financial malpractice. Oh, you'll be telling my lawyer all about it, Robert, I countered, my resolve firm, because my lawyer will now be seeking an equitable share of all marital assets, including the significant value you invested into this property over the past 5 years. You wanted a safety net? I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to take the market value of the rope you used to build it. Audrey, finally realizing the legal consequence of her confession, rounded on Robert with a fury that eclipsed her earlier panic. You idiot! You told me this arrangement was safe. You said Clara would never know, she shrieked. Now she's going to seize the equity. Leo's home is going to be caught in your disgusting lies. Don't you dare bring Leo into this, Audrey, Robert yelled back, the two of them instantly devolving into the toxic battlefield he had spent years running from. It is about Leo, Robert, Audrey retorted, tears streaming down her face. You told me you were doing this for Leo's future, but you were doing it for your credit score. You've ruined his stability. As their argument intensified, a sound cut through the noise. A tentative footstep on the stairs. I looked up. Standing halfway down the wooden staircase, looking small and utterly lost in a worn t-shirt, was Leo. His eyes, usually bright with teenage sarcasm, were wide and red-rimmed. He had clearly been awakened by the shouting and was witnessing the total, catastrophic failure of both his parents and his stepmother. Dad? Leo's voice was a soft, broken whisper. What's going on? You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in Seattle. The sight of his son, the true victim in this long, elaborate deception, finally brought Robert to his knees. He sank onto one of Audrey's worn kitchen chairs, burying his face in his hands. Leo, honey, I'm so sorry, he choked out, his voice muffled by his hands. It's a mistake, a misunderstanding. I was just helping your mom. I'm leaving now. I walked calmly past the two warring adults and approached Leo, keeping a respectful distance at the foot of the stairs. Hi, Leo, I said softly. I'm so sorry you had to wake up to this. You were right about the car. Your dad is not in Seattle. Leo looked from his sobbing father and his hysterical mother to me, the calm, orderly woman who had driven 5 hours in the middle of the night. Why did he lie? Leo asked, his gaze settling on Robert with cold, devastating clarity. Robert lifted his head, his face a mess of tears and snot. He started to speak, but I gently cut him off. Because he was afraid of losing something, Leo, I explained, choosing my words carefully, addressing the situation without assigning blame, only fact. He was afraid of losing his financial stability, and he was afraid of being honest about his commitments. That fear made him choose a complicated lie instead of a simple truth. But he is going to fix it now. He's going to tell the truth, and he's going to take responsibility for his actions. I look back at Robert, whose eyes were pleading with me. Robert, tell Leo the truth about the financial situation. Tell him you made a mistake and that you are going to take your name off this house immediately to protect his home. Robert nodded frantically, unable to speak, the sight of his son's disappointment more painful than any legal threat. The emotional climax was over. I had my proof, I had my witness, and Robert's facade was destroyed in front of the only person he genuinely cared about. There was nothing left for me to do here. I turned back to Leo. You were very brave to call me Leo. Thank you for your honesty. I gave one last chilling look at Robert and Audrey, who were now clinging to each other in a desperate, codependent embrace. The real nature of their complicated relationship laid bare. Lena, I called out, my voice echoing from the front door. We're done, let's go. As Lena appeared in the doorway, I took a deep breath of the stale, messy air of Audrey's house, then walked out, stepping back into the cool, clean night I had spent years searching for my second chance with Robert. But I finally realized that my true second chance was the moment I got into my car and drove away from his lie. The drive back felt strangely liberating. Lena and I didn't speak much. The emotional intensity of the confrontation had left us both drained, but the silence was peaceful, no longer the tense quiet of uncertainty, but the calm aftermath of a successful mission. I had faced the truth, and the truth, though ugly, was clean. The next morning, armed with the photographs and the details of Robert's forced confession, we met with Ms. Hayes. She was methodical and precise, her excitement barely contained. The financial aspect changes everything, Clara, Ms. Hayes confirmed, tapping the details of the secret mortgage arrangement. He wasn't just hiding an affair, he was actively managing a significant, high-risk, undisclosed financial obligation. We are filing for divorce immediately on the grounds of financial infidelity and fraud. The legal papers were served the following day. Robert's response was swift, panicked, and utterly predictable. His lawyer, a different, less aggressive one, tried to argue that the mortgage was a compassionate arrangement for the welfare of his minor child, Leo, and that the deception was merely a regrettable oversight. Ms. Hayes laughed. An oversight that required a fake business trip, a FedEx decoy, and a 5-year concealment? We have the wife's testimony and the son's witness to the confrontation. The court will not see this as compassion, it will see it as calculation. But the real consequence came not from the court, but from Robert's profession. His firm, a respected entity in the architecture world, was fiercely protective of its reputation. The moment the divorce filing mentioned concealment of significant long-term financial liabilities and fraud, the internal alarms went off. Robert had been using his firm's resources, time, travel funds, company phones, to manage a personal financial crisis stemming from a secret arrangement. The risk to the firm's integrity was too high. Lena found the news first, a small, discreet piece buried on a financial architecture news site. Lena, text 2 p.m. Check the industry news. Robert M. is taking an extended leave of absence from the firm. Immediate effect. Me. Text 2:01 p.m. Translation: fired. The extended leave was the professional euphemism for being forced out. Robert had spent his entire career building a facade of impeccable integrity, and the foundation had finally crumbled under the weight of his personal lies and financial duplicity. He lost his stable income, his status, and the very structure that allowed him to maintain his double life. Predictably, the emotional counterattack came from Audrey. She wasn't just mourning the loss of Robert's financial support. She was furious that the sale of the house, Leo's home, now seemed inevitable due to the legal entanglement. She posted a scathing, veiled statement on a local parents' group forum, knowing it would spread quickly through the community that knew us both, Audrey. Post excerpt. It is heartbreaking to see the damage that a jealous, vindictive woman can inflict on a family. When you marry someone with a history, you must respect the ongoing commitment to the children. Instead, some people choose to turn their own emotional inadequacy into an obsessive campaign of revenge, trying to financially destroy a child's home out of spite. Remember who the real victims are here. The message was a calculated attempt to reposition herself and Robert as the innocent parents under attack by the jealous, obsessive stepmother. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting to protect the truth, especially for Leo. I spent an hour crafting my response, using the language of the curator, factual, measured, and devastatingly precise. I posted it to the same group directly below Audrey's post. Clara M. reply. To clarify the narrative being presented, my decision to file for divorce is based solely on the discovery that my husband, Robert M., knowingly concealed a significant long-term financial liability, specifically a secret co-liability on the mortgage of his ex-wife's home. This financial arrangement was maintained throughout our marriage as his safety net and constitutes fraud. The recent trip was a multi-day fabrication to deal with a missed payment and save his credit rating. I took legal action to secure my own financial stability after discovering this profound betrayal. My goal is not vengeance, but the legal and ethical disentanglement from a financial lie that risked our shared assets. I wish Leo stability and health, and I urge Robert to act with integrity now to protect his son's home by legally transferring the full deed to his mother, an action he has thus far refused to take. My response was brief, precise, and entirely focused on facts and financial terms, bypassing the emotional accusation of jealousy. I didn't mention Audrey's vindictive post. I only addressed the narrative. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The parents group, many of whom were professionals themselves, recognized the gravity of financial fraud over emotional inadequacy. Robert's carefully constructed image as the respectable architect finally dissolved into that of a high-risk liability. The final chapter was imminent. Robert, stripped of his job and facing ruin in the divorce court, was now forced to confront the wreckage he had created. He had wanted a clean separation, but his fear and greed ensured that his downfall was total, public, and irrevocable. I was ready to sign the papers and walk away, but there was one last quiet detail I needed to finalize before I closed this book forever. The official signing took place in a neutral conference room at Ms. Hayes's office. It was sparsely decorated, functional, and offered no comfort. Robert arrived alone, looking utterly defeated. his tailored suit now appearing several sizes too large for his diminished frame. He signed the papers quickly, his pen scratching against the high-quality paper. The settlement was heavily skewed in my favor, forcing him to liquidate a significant portion of his assets to cover the money he fraudulently invested in Audrey's house and to compensate for my financial losses and legal fees. He didn't fight. He went to ruin to do so. "There's just one thing I need to say, Clara," Robert muttered after pushing the final document across the table. His voice was low and brittle. "You have 10 minutes," I replied, glancing at my watch. I wasn't being cruel. I was merely setting a boundary that he had repeatedly failed to respect. "It wasn't just the money," he confessed, staring at the polished wood table. "When I was with Audrey, everything was chaos, but it was passionate. It was messy. It was life. When I came to you, you were so organized, so perfect, so orderly. I told myself I needed that. I needed the calm." He finally looked up, his eyes empty. "But sometimes, Clara, your order felt suffocating, like a beautiful, airtight museum display. You cataloged every emotion. You categorized every problem. It felt like I couldn't breathe. I needed the mess. I needed the drama." He was attempting his final justification, turning my greatest asset, my stability and integrity, into the reason for his betrayal. He was still trying to make me the culprit of his discomfort. "So you faked a business trip and drove 5 hours to another woman's home, not because you were in a crisis, but because you missed the thrill of chaos," I summarized, keeping my voice level. "I missed feeling something," he burst out, his voice rising in frustration. "I missed the urgency, the drama. You were too easy, Clara. I needed the fight." I smiled, a small, genuine smile that held no malice, only profound pity. "You are absolutely correct, Robert," I conceded. "I was too easy because I offered you trust and honesty, and I mistook your hunger for drama for a desire for peace. But you never needed a drama-free life. You needed a life where you could be the victim, the hero, and the martyr simultaneously." I leaned forward, my hands resting calmly on the table. "You called me orderly, but my order is what allowed me to spot your fraud. My calmness is what allowed me to dismantle your life with surgical precision, and my stability is what will allow me to thrive now that you are gone. My order is simply another word for integrity, Robert, something you never possessed." I pushed my copy of the signed documents back towards me. The conversation was over. "There is one final item," I stated. "As part of the settlement, I have received the full market value equivalent of your stake in Audrey's house. I have instructed Ms. Hayes to place 10% of that money into a restricted educational trust fund." Robert looked bewildered. "Why? For what?" "For Leo," I explained. "It's an anonymous fund, his college education. I am doing this not for you, and certainly not for Audrey. I am doing this because Leo showed me more honesty and courage than both of you combined. He should not pay the price for his parents' inability to tell the simple truth." I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Tell Leo that I hope his life is filled with simple, honest pleasures. As for you, Robert, you can go back to your drama. But this time, you'll be playing the role of the bankrupt fraud, not the hero." I walked out, leaving him sitting alone in the sterile conference room, the signature on the document the final, undeniable proof of his failure. My second chance didn't begin with Robert. It began with the courage to walk away from his lie I was no longer the quiet curator of ancient history. I was the architect of my own future. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.